Fast. I can't help but feel we are exceptionally lucky this weekend to be here.
Really lucky. In fact, I was just catching up with somebody who was saying that they've never been to something like this before and the experience has been amazing. And then obviously I heard the cars and that was my cue, run.
Yeah, certainly do need to run because they reverberate through the entire arena, through this circuit, even though the Dubai Autodrome has seen. These are certainly quite special. We've just seen the Benetton of Michael Schumacher go past. We've seen the Alan Prost Ferrari. And here we go. Here's Sophia Flörsch going past as well. And I know we spoke to her yesterday. She's loving it.
Yeah, she's absolutely loving it. And I think, you know, the fact that she got the opportunity to do it as we watch yet another. I mean, really, it's the sound, isn't it? That Arrows is absolutely beautiful. But I think, you know, talking about, say, even the Benetton, Michael Schumacher. I mean, Michael Schumacher was here. He has, you know, he has been here, has been in a car here, and kept quite a low profile, but thoroughly enjoyed his time on track as well. So I think we're very lucky. A lot of the F1 cars end up here before or after, well, usually after the end of Formula One, because it finishes just down the road here at Abu Dhabi, and then they have the young drivers, and then they have a lot of corporate events here with Formula One, so I think we're very lucky.
We are, and we just caught up with Nico Prost a little while ago, and he said the first thing he said when he got out of the car was, "Dad, you were a lucky man to race in the era that you were in." And that seems to be the sentiment overall for all of these drivers who've got a piece of that raw machinery that the previous generations had under them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, you sort of look at your parents as you're growing up and think, oh, I'm not really interested in what they do. Oh yeah, they're just this, that or the other. I think it is genuinely the same for kids of, you know, professional athletes. They understand there's something a bit special, but until you grow up and you get an opportunity to experience just a tiny part of the life that they had, the difference between, you know, Nico racing these days, even though he started relatively late, and his father racing is absolutely huge. I mean, they would never have had the support you get these days.
That's bliss, isn't it?
Yeah, it's absolute bliss, and something that, you know, I don't know about you, but I miss that era. You know, I miss hearing the cars at such sound. But we've also got to remember that that's what makes this weekend so special, is that we don't get to hear these things anymore. But we're also lucky because, you know, modern day, even, you know, back in the 90s, there's a lot of influence that comes from top level motorsport that ends up in road cars. And, you know, you look at a Formula One car and you think, what could ever have happened? But, you know, even talk about coalition of fours, or you know, looking at the aerodynamics, which obviously you can see a lot of. They play a huge part in electric vehicles more than combustion vehicles.
Absolutely. Now we've just got some of the cars on track at the moment. Sophia Flörsch is actually in the Brabham, the last Brabham that ever raced in Formula One. So let's take you across to Scott in the commentary box, and we'll go straight to on-track action.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Sahel and Alex. Of course, we've got the F1 demonstration currently out on track at the moment. For those who are watching on the stream, you would have seen just in the pit lane at the moment is the 1992 Benetton in camel colours. I was going to mention the last two cars which we've got here before we cut across to Sahel and Alex, and that was the March 87 car that we've got, which is the the only car which they ran in 1987 with Ivan Capelli at the wheel. That car has Andrea Lotterer driving it for these sessions. He has been for most of the weekend. The other two cars that we have, as they've touched on in that conversation just there, one is the multicoloured Brabham B192, it's 1992 Brabham, which was the last Brabham which they actually ran, as they rightfully said, and it was driven that year by Eric van der Poel, Giovanna Amati, who was the last woman to attempt to qualify and compete in F1 weekend competitive in terms of qualifying for a weekend. And also Damon Hill, of course, he was 1996 Formula 1 world champion, son of multiple-time world champion Graham Hill. But this, I think, if you're watching trackside and also on screen, is the car that most people have been excited the most to see, and that is the 1991 Ferrari 643. You can see the driver's head being buffeted around with the turbulence as he heads down the pit straight. But a wonderful sight, and more importantly, a more wonderful sound that it produces here with the V12. There's plenty of people you can see if you're watching on the stream, people who are watching in the Apex Garden, getting trackside to watch this car come through at turn 14 and 15. And the other two cars we've got, of course, the Brabham just going down the pit straight, and also the footwork arrows as well. The Brabham, in period, would have been powered by a Judd engine, but I think before that evolution would have also been powered also by a Yamaha V12 at one point too, I think in 1991. And this was the era when, we were talking yesterday with Alex about these cars, is that this is the era when, and some teams, because the budgets that are still involved, and some of the teams that had less money than some of the bigger outfits, like Ferrari and Williams and McLaren and Benetton in some cases, and even McLaren did it at one point in the mid-90s, when in 91, 92, and Benetton did the same thing, and Ferrari also did it too, where some teams, and in fact even Williams, when they were developing the FW14B, when it went on to win the World Championship with Nigel Mansell at the wheel, some teams would keep the same car, and it was quite common even in the early to mid-90s, could keep the same car for the following season but have it as an evolution with developed parts until the new car was ready. It's not like these days in 2022, or it wasn't these days when teams can develop a brand new car within a season and use all the technology of computer-aided design, computer-aided manufacturer, wind tunnel testing and everything else. They had to really look after these designs and put them together very much by hand. It was only in those sort of 80s and 90s periods when computer-aided design was starting to come through, and the use of computers to design Formula 1 cars was becoming a lot more prominent. So for teams like, smaller teams like Brabham, and also with footwork and all others, some of them would start the season, or would use the same chassis for as many as 2 seasons, 3, maybe 4 seasons, because it was just more cost effective to do so, and would just then upgrade and develop that existing car all the way through. You'd have them into C-spec or D-specification chassis to go through. I think that the Ferrari is now being allowed to get a bit more onto the rev limits this time, because it's now revving a bit louder than it has been previously. The Brabham Judd does have indeed Sophia Flörsch at the wheel. So Sophia, of course, has experience in single seaters, mainly up to Formula 3 level, but she's been more commonly racing the past couple of seasons in endurance racing, particularly in the LMP2 category. And Sophia definitely enjoying her first proper runs in a Formula 1 car ever. And that's been taking plenty of attention on social media, and if you see any of her posts, she's had practically, even underneath her crash helmet, has had the biggest smile all weekend, because she's been absolutely loving and enjoying it, as I'm certain other people have as well. The other car we should mention, which is the white and blue footwork arrows. Now that car, as we're watching on the screen here, is the Benetton B192. The other car, which is the footwork arrows, now that car was the FA14. Now that car was ran in 1993, and it had a Mugen Honda engine in the back, but they've changed it to a Judd V8 because it's more easily sourceable, and the elements and parts for those cars are not easy to come by. But that car is not running in its period livery. It's actually running in the 1994 livery, which it ran. Of course, when that car had Christian Fittipaldi and Gianni Morbidelli at the wheel of that car. So that car had been driven. But in 1993, that footwork arrows would have been driven in the white and red footwork livery by Derek Warwick and Aguri Suzuki. So that car also looking pretty prominent. But we've got 3 of them on track together now. We've got Sophia Flörsch on screen now in the Brabham. And it still has the Yamaha stickers on the side of it, I can see. So it's good to see. On screen, I can see now heading down the pit straight is Andrea Lotterer. He's in the oldest car, what should be the 6 on track here. Again, the only car that hasn't gone out just yet. And hopefully, if it does, if it doesn't, it'll be unfortunate. But hopefully, we get the nice 96 Benetton out before this session's done. Because if it's not the case, that would be quite a shame if it can't make it out. So we've got the car circulating now. So hopefully, all those watching on the live stream, and also those watching around in the grandstands and on the circuit, enjoying these sights and sounds of F1 in the early 90s. Sounds of V10s, V8s, and indeed V12s. This was the atmospheric era from 1989 to 1995 when they had 3.5 litre engines, and they really were some of the most incredible sounding F1 cars of all time. It's the Ferrari 643. Of course, that was Ferrari's 1991 car, and that was driven mainly by Alain Prost and a young Jean Alesi when he just joined the team. He was primed to join Williams in 1991, but then was told on a promise that he would be signed. There had been an announcement to say that he'd signed the contract, but nothing came of it, and therefore Frank Williams kept on delaying Alesi signing, and then the opportunity from Ferrari came up, and of course any Formula 1 driver, when you get the call from Maranello, you don't necessarily turn that one down. So he decided to switch to the prancing horse, and while he only picked up one win in his career, that was in 1995, right at the end of what you could call the atmospheric kind of V12 era, it was very much, in many cases for Alesi, a bit of unrealised potential, I think many will agree, because yes, he was a great driver, but he was in so many positions during his lifetime racing for Ferrari where he was in positions to win races, particularly in 1994 and 95, and just the car let him down, or results didn't go his way, or the car wasn't as competitive as the Williams or the Benettons or any other cars around him. But it was more often than not mechanical issues that sidelined him and forced him to have to retire from races. He started on the front row at Hockenheim in 94 and had problems on the opening lap. He had the issues when he retired early on after taking pole at Monza in 94. He was also in a good position in the Nürburgring in 1995, and he was passed late on by that incredible charge through by Michael Schumacher in the Benetton. And even at Suzuka that year as well, 95, when he was in a position to be leading early on, and then again Schumacher picking his way through and pushed his way towards the front. And in the end, in what was a slightly slippery conditions, I think Alesi at one point was the fastest man on track and was catching him at one point. So, and of course, you didn't talk about Alain Prost on top of that. And Alain Prost was a Ferrari driver for 2 seasons. He joined in 1990 off the back of the infamous collision with Ayrton Senna at Suzuka. Joined Ferrari, was in another titanic scrap between himself and Senna, which eventually saw the culmination of that infamous collision in 1990 at the first corner at Suzuka, which decided the championship. Still stuck around for 91, and I think as we talked about a couple of times, the whole story that goes around of Alain Prost stating that the Ferrari was a truck, I think that's been a bit misquoted, because there's been 1 or 2 quite excellent podcasts that are done by called Bring Back V10s. They've got a great series of different cars talking about F1 from this era, from 1989 all the way to 2005. And one of the initial ones that they did was a 2-part podcast on Prost's 1991 season. And they actually talk about it, and I think it's part of Alain Prost's book somewhere as well. And they talk about the fact that Prost didn't actually, if I'm correct, didn't actually call the Ferrari a truck at the time. It was actually a bit of a misinterpretation by the team and maybe by the media, is that it was something to do with the handling of the car at the time made it feel like a truck, or it felt like he was driving a truck, with something to do with the suspension. But he wasn't actually calling the Ferrari he was driving a truck. He wasn't calling it a bad car. And at one point, it was quite competitive. It was up there battling for the lead at one stage at Magny-Cours in 1991. So that car wasn't terrible. And of course, they then used that car at the beginning of 1992 until the 92 chassis was ready to bring in after a few races. But of course, as many people remember in the Ferraris of those days, it's the V12, it's the evocative wailing sound of the V12 in the back, and of course we've had another of those F1 derived V12s in the back of the Ferrari 333 SP prototype, which has been quite exciting to watch. The 1992 Benetton, which is in its original, of course, camel livery, that was another car which didn't start the 1992 season. That, in fact, saw the 1991 chassis, the B191, start the 1991 season for the first couple of rounds. And I think it was in Brazil, the first car, or even Imola after a couple of races, where they brought that car in after it was finally ready to go. And that had the sort of, at the time, sort of innovative higher nose, which, when they were developing that car, when a couple of designers left Benetton, or the Pacific team in 1994 had a very similar design, when that was helped, I think, by Reynard. I think it was an assistance, I think, for Reynard a little bit in terms of that design, and some of that was sort of taken across to Benetton, and they utilised those designs. It was a Rory Byrne designed chassis, because Rory Byrne starting off that incredibly lengthy partnership, which was cut off briefly when Schumacher went to Ferrari, although I think he did bring Rory Byrne with him for 1996. And Ross Brawn followed shortly after for 1997. But it was those incredible designs which Rory Byrne, he designed some incredible race cars, of course, including those early Benettons. And it was that early partnership where he got together with Michael Schumacher and the whole crew, and eventually formed this incredible, almost unbeatable quartet of Michael Schumacher, Ross Brawn, Rory Byrne, and Jean Todt being the team manager. And that Benetton, of course, was also driven by Martin Brundle throughout the season. Martin Brundle coming close, absolutely on more than one occasion of winning races. And so he's certainly one of the best drivers, I think, in Formula 1 to have never won a Formula 1 race. And he's still scored a few seconds and third places over his time. And, of course, alongside that, he's taken plaudits by winning Le Mans in 1990, being a world sports car champion. He's done all sorts of great racing, has Martin. Of course, nowadays is quite a renowned Formula 1 colour commentator, has been since 1997 when he was alongside the late and very great Murray Walker. And of course, going forward, he was alongside James Allen and was on his own, Jonathan Ledyard in the early BBC days. And he was on his own for the 2011 season, all leading with David Coulthard alongside him. And then for 2012 onwards, he's always been in the partnership with David Croft. The Benetton has the Ford Cosworth V8 in the back, the HB V8, which is also quite a common engine that they used, not just in the Formula 1 cars, but they also used them in a couple of sports prototypes at the time in the World Sports Car Championship. We've seen some of the 80 sports prototypes that we've had racing today. This is right at the beginning of the very short-lived 3.5 litre era. We saw the Jaguar XJR 14 of the time use the same 3.5 litre Cosworth HB V8 in that one. It's quite a potent engine. It was essentially the Works F1 engine from Ford, and gave it their full attention on that side. And the March 1987 March, I think, was the last F1 car for March that was designed before Adrian Newey started to put his hand towards the 88 cars and onwards. At the time, if you've ever read Adrian Newey's book, How to Design a Motor Car, How to Design a Race Car, or a name of that effect, he talks about how initially when he joined March he was working on their sports cars back in sort of 83, 84 and improving the design and the ground effect and how they went quicker. And then he sort of moved on for a few years in IndyCar when he was engineering the likes of Bobby Rahal and also then Michael Andretti. And it was only when he started to come across into 87, 88 when he started to create those designs which then sort of lead on to go to Williams and be successful at World Championship level, then to McLaren, then to Red Bull, of course, to where he is today. This, of course, has been the last pre-Adrian Newey March in that sense. Just seeing the Brabham go down the pit straight now. Nice 92 Brabham with the Judd V10 in the back. And still, I think, Sophia Flörsch at the wheel. Of course, people have followed Sophia Flörsch's career. That started all the way back in the UK, back in the days of Ginetta Juniors, when she competed in that championship and proved her worth. And since then, she's steadily climbed up the single-seater ladder. And like I said, the last couple of seasons, she's been competing at the endurance level in the European Le Mans series. Has also taken part of Le Mans. She's also done a little bit of DTM. She did DTM in 2021 when it went to the GT3 format, racing an Audi R8. On top of that, she's done FIA Formula 3. She's also done the LMP World Endurance Championship in LMP2. She's raced in Formula Regional European Championship, European Formula 3, and then ADAC Formula 4 as well. And then, of course, way back in 2015 was when she was racing in Ginetta Juniors. And she competed in that, won 2 races and took 4 podiums. So she's certainly someone who has proven herself throughout her career, not just in junior level, but also many single-seaters. And now he's looking to hopefully continue forging her career in sports car racing. And you've got a podium this season in the European Le Mans Series in LMP2 at Paul Ricard, right at the start of the season, when she picked up 2nd place in class. So it's wonderful to have Sophia and so many great drivers here this weekend, and they all seem to be given the same message and the same ethos that it's a fantastic event, it's surpassing their expectations, they really are enjoying the spectacle, of course the weather that comes with being in Dubai, and the amount of great cars here, the amount of people that are turning up and enjoying the event. And ultimately, we've talked about the potential this event has for the next few years. And of course, there are plenty of different 90s Grand Prix cars that are around the world. There was a big demonstration at the Goodwood Revival, I think, or the members' meeting at the beginning of this year, where there's plenty of 90s F1 cars that turned out. Hopefully, we can get some of those over for next year's event. And on top of that, maybe even more categories can come in. Maybe some for touring cars, maybe some for more kind of older GT machines, and we can get some of the 90s GT's cars, which are so popular in GT1, like even a McLaren F1 or 2 or a Porsche 911 GT1. It really does have a lot of potential here with this being an end-of-season event, and with the historic motorsport events very much being on vogue, that we hopefully get to the point where it becomes a must-see and a must-attend event like Goodwood and like the Silverstone Classic and like others which are so incredible. And what a setting you've got. Dubai Autodrome set right next to Sports City and in Motor City as well. Particularly at this time of year when in mainland Europe the weather conditions really aren't that pleasant, whereas here, of course, you've got fantastic weather to go with the even more incredible machinery and drivers that are on display here too. So the session, I believe, has been red flagged. Just keeping tabs on the schedule for the rest of this session. And so this demonstration looks like it's wrapping up just about now, I think. So, but still about roughly 10 minutes to go in this demonstration. It's been a bit of a red flag. I haven't seen on the cameras, at least on my screen, which of the cars has seemingly come to a stop. We've seen the Benettons come back into the pit lane, so that certainly isn't that one. So whilst we do that one, of course, we'll be looking ahead to our next on-track action afterwards. There'll be the raw minutes in the paddock, so at around about 1 o'clock, if you want to head to the paddock, they'll be bringing the cars through and bringing them forwards out of their pit boxes and pretty much just firing them up and giving them a bit of a fantastic audible spectacle, and as well as showing them up all lined up at the back of the pit. So if you do want to go and check that out, go and cross over to the inner paddock where you'll be welcome to go and look at all the cars up close. If you haven't already, I do recommend getting over towards the inner village where you can see all these cars, whether they be these Grand Prix cars that have been out, of course the 70s and 80s Grand Prix cars that will be racing later on as the next race coming up. And also you've got some excellent array of different classic cars and sports cars, and even cars like old school Jaguar C-types and D-types, which are down there as well. There's a couple of C-types and a D-type, which is down in there, as well as some more modern supercars, like a couple of Lamborghini Diablos. If you go further down, you've got a wonderful, beautiful dark green Porsche. There's a couple of BMW M3 E30s. There's a very unique Ferrari SP2 Monza, which is also in the paddock too. So keep an eye out for that one if you're happen to be here. Because, of course, for those who might be watching on the live stream, of course, this is also going out around to the circuit here at Dubai Autodrome. Now, I think we've got some more on-track action going on in a second, because I can hear 1 or 2 engines being started up in pit lane, so it's good to hear if we've got that. Quick note on the Ferrari SP2 Monza. And these being limited production sports cars. Usually they're the kind of cars which they reserve and put together for special customers who have been quite loyal Ferrari customers and supporters for quite a while. Yeah, just looking at information here on the Ferrari website, it talks about how they're a bit of a leitmotif of the most evocative cars in the company's history to create a new segment of special limited series cars for clients and collectors. And the intention is to use a modern aesthetic to reinterpret a timeless classic. So, for example, the SP2 Monza that you've got, it's a Ferrari Speedster. So there's no windscreen. It's simply just what you would have seen back in the late 40s and early 50s when Ferrari was just getting started as a car manufacturer, and even just a racing team that started producing its own cars. And when they started taking these cars to sports car races around the world, and to events like the Targa Florio and Mille Miglia and even Le Mans and other big long distance events, and when they started being successful, it was those kind of speedster style sports cars that got them started off in there, and that's kind of an homage to them in terms of what's been put together. And there's a really wonderful example of the SP2. It's in red and blue. If you want to go and check it out in the village, if you are here at Dubai Autodrome. And there's also a couple of Lamborghini Diablos, as I mentioned. There's also in there's a Ferrari Testarossa. There's a Ferrari Ferrari 550. If you're a Group B fan, there's a little Renault R5 Turbo 2 down there too. One of the proper little tarmac rally. Well, it's strongest on tarmac rallies rather than on gravels, but it did do not too bad at events like Corsica where there was a little bit of gravel around. And I think we have got cars back out on track for the 1990s demonstration for what we have left in our last few minutes before these cars are tucked away back to the village where you can see them up close. So we've got the Brabham, the Footwork Arrows and the Benetton out on track. We'll see if we've got the Ferrari too, and maybe even the March. And these really are some wonderful, enjoyable cars to experience here. And it's not often that you get the 90s F1 cars out. They used to be quite prominent when we had the event, series such as Boss Formula, and then those who remember the days of Euro Boss back in the days when that started up. But Boss is actually an acronym. It's, or if that's the term, it's short for Big Open Single Seaters. So it includes Formula 1 cars. These days, the Boss Formula, it does feature Formula 1 cars. It has likes of a couple of ex-Jaguar F1 cars run by Klaus Vart and his Ascari team. We've also got occasionally a sort of 2010, 2011 Williams turns out and races there too. There's been a couple of Toro Rossos, a couple of Super Aguris have raced, and even a couple of Benettons, older Benettons in the past from about 1997. So there's still some F1 cars that rattle around and race, but back in the day when Euroboss used to be quite a little bit bigger, you used to get not just Benettons but also cars that had already been decommissioned and stopped racing in Formula 1 from a couple of years previous. You used to get cars from the year, let's say the year 2000, for example. You used to get a nice 98 Tyrrell would go and race, and that would be somebody like Paul Stoddart who would collect and bring these cars out and have them raced. And it was great to see that even just after a couple of years after they finished, when you think nowadays when Formula 1 cars get locked away into the factories of the F1 teams that still have them as museum pieces and mementos of previous years so they can keep them safe. Those are the days when teams don't produce 4, 5, 6 cars as spare chassis because of budget caps and everything else on top of that. They're only really permitted to create a baseline of 2, maybe a third chassis in case a spare one's needed if something happens to one of them. But you think about back then when teams used to come, particularly the smaller teams, and even teams, say small teams, even as high as ones that like Benetton and particularly Benetton has got that far in some cases. Tyrrell was one of them too. Minardi and others, even Footwork Arrows and other sort of maybe British-based or smaller teams that wanted to just sell those cars off to make a little more money to allow them to develop the new cars going forwards for the main Formula 1 championship. But these cars would then be picked up by collectors and enthusiasts. They'd take them out and either bring them in events like this or even race them in the sort of the single-seater series that we have. And I think it would be great to have some proper races, even rather just demonstration ones, to actually have some races like we've had with the GT2000 and prototypes and the 80s Group C cars and the 70s Formula 1 cars, that we have to have a couple of races, actual races for these 90s F1 cars, because I'd love to see a few more of them. You look at some of the McLarens that have come out the woodworking, a couple of the Williams cars as well. There's 1 or 2 Ferraris that are also still around when it comes to demonstrations. They particularly are prominent in events like the Ferrari Corsa Cliente, which is reserved exclusively for people who are Ferrari customers, and they are that such loyal and that such dedicated customers that they allow them to purchase things such as genuine bona fide Ferrari Formula 1 cars that have been driven by the likes of Alain Prost and Niki Lauda and mostly Michael Schumacher, Fernando Alonso, Felipe Massa, those kind of cars that have come through. And there are dedicated days for those Ferrari F1 cars where they will go out and have several cars out at once, whether it's at their particular event or whether Ferrari take over a track such as Imola or Mugello or even Spa, where they go over there and race, go drive it. And they give them the opportunity to drive these cars, but they're all looked after in-house, mainly by Ferrari. So Ferrari will prepare the cars and maintain them and keep them in top working order, so that should one of their clients want to race one of their cars, they'll simply say, I want to race it at this particular, drive at this particular circuit. They'll ship it over to the circuit, they'll get it, a few mechanics to go over there and look after it, and they'll even get someone like Marc Genet to come over, who is quite a well-established name, at least particularly within Ferrari circles when it comes to testing F1 cars, and also sort of overseeing some of the Corsa F1 Cliente, and that he even joins them on track in some cases in 1 or 2 cars. He usually pops out in something like a 2009 Ferrari in that case, but you've had cars that have been purchased from 2007, 2008 that also run in there too. A bit of a fun on-track battle going on here. We've got the Brabham and the Footwork Arrows that are going a little bit wheel to wheel here. I think we're coming towards the end of the F190 demonstration, unfortunately, but it's great that we've got the 5 cars that we've had go out on track. Sadly, it looks as though we haven't been able to get the 1996 Benetton out, which is a real shame, but hopefully it does come back next year, and if we do get these F1 cars back again, then we will indeed have hopefully one of those cars working and running and actually driving. And I hope that we do get, there are Jordans around, there are Tyrrells, there are more Benettons, there are other cars, there's even 1 or 2 Ferraris if the F1 Cliente want to get involved. There's, of course, 1 or 2 Williams cars that are being sold on and purchased. Particularly one of them, of course, you have to think about is the World Championship winning Williams Renault, which was purchased by a certain Sebastian Vettel, of course, who's just left Formula One and retired, and that car was running on an alternative sort of artificially made fuel, rather than from oil, but from renewable fuel to allow these cars to continue racing and driving as much as possible. So there's genuine potential for a lot of other cars that could turn up. Maybe some of the cars that also regularly compete in the Boss GP Championship might be willing to come down and have a go themselves. It might be we extend it to 90s, maybe even 2000s F1 cars, and we get quite a few of them on track together. I'm certain that the organisers of this event will have plenty of plans and plenty of ideas to help increase the reach and to make it even more popular than it already is here at Dubai Autodrome. And again, we have to say a big thank you to everyone who's turned out, not just today, but to all the 3 days that we've had for the public here, Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Yesterday was quite incredible because we had none other than the man who drove the Ferrari 643, which you've seen on track. And that is Alain Prost. He was actually here yesterday, sort of looking after, speaking to and overseeing his son, Nicolas, who of course is here demonstrating one or two of the cars. And it was great that, of course, if you watched on the live stream here and watched on the coverage, that Sohail got the chance to speak to Alain Prost, and he was talking about how it's wonderful to sit here and see these cars again in such pristine condition, and how much he's enjoying being in Dubai and how incredible the event is. And that's the thing; it's getting lots of great plaudits from quite a few notable names in motorsport within drivers that still exist or drivers that have been coming here just to enjoy themselves. I know Stefan Johansson's been here and has meant to be involved in driving one or two of the cars here, including the Toyota, I think. We also had, I believe there's one or two. We even had the multiple MotoGP champion Jorge Lorenzo drop by here on, I think it was Friday. So even he's been intrigued by the whole event. It's amazing who turns out at an event like this in Dubai when all the racing season's finished. And that's the whole purpose, is that this event is here to pretty much allow motorsport fans and even drivers and teams a chance to say, look, we've had the whole long season. It's been long, it's been arduous, it's either been successful, it could have gone better, but here's the chance to if you've got a historic car, even for a driver that's had a good season or not, just to come to Dubai, to kind of let their hair down, just enjoy themselves and just be, first and foremost, a fan, but secondly, of course, to drive some cars which ordinarily they wouldn't have never had the chance to drive before, or even they're getting a chance to drive for the first time, because it's a great opportunity for them to experience something different. I mean, case in point, Sophia Flörsch, who's had her first sample of an F1 car this weekend, and as I mentioned on the social media channels, has not stopped beaming since. She's been absolutely over the moon with her exploits this weekend, and I'm certain that she'll be back for more, to have another go at this. They even competed one or two of the races. I'm sure next year she'd love to do that. So I believe, in terms of the schedule, that is our F1 demonstration complete, because the schedule tells me that it's set to wrap up at around about 11:50, which is what we're pretty much at now, just gone past that. So the next on-track action is set to be the Formula 1 70s race, and that's coming up at roughly around about 2:15, I believe. So that's 2:15 is when that race is set to start. So I think we're going into a slightly more extended match break. I think we're also going to get possibly some sponsor hot laps coming here at around about 12:25. So we're getting around about maybe sort of a long sort of lunch break coming up here very shortly. So again, if you're around in the grandstands, if you're around in the Apex Garden, if you're around anywhere else, please do have a look around the entire exhibition and the entire show here at Gulf Historic. There's plenty to see, plenty to do. There's plenty of fantastic stalls and stands. There's also, of course, the village where you can see all these cars you've just seen out on track parked up in their awnings. You can also see, the 80s F1 cars that are going to be out there too. Some of the classic cars, some of the special cars like the Ferrari SP2 Monza we've talked about. There's the main stage where there'll have our DJ, we'll have a magician, there'll be some fantastic acts and music being played as well. You've got the vintage bicycles, you've also got down there some more cars parked towards the top end as well. There's so much to see and do around here at this Gulf Historic event, so be sure to go and check it out, and I'm certain it's going to be quite fun. So I think we're going to get next on track, as I say, some of the sponsor activation, sponsor hot laps that will be coming up. And then once we've done that, we'll also have in the paddock at 1 o'clock the Raw Minute, so be sure to be around the podium and paddock for that one. And then the next race, as we mentioned, will be the build-up to the second of the weekend for the Formula 1 70s cars, and we'll see if Mike Cantillon can make it 2 from 2 in the Tyrrell 010, or whether or not, if he's got the car back to full strength again, Ollie Webb can reclaim a victory after he won the first ever Formula 1 70s race last year at the very first Gulf Historic in that very same Heska 308C. So be sure to stay tuned for that one. 2:15 is when the next race will be coming up. There'll be some on-track sponsor laps coming up at around about 12:25 or so. That's coming in about roughly half an hour's time or so. So please enjoy the sunshine, enjoy the spectacle, enjoy the incredible event here at Golf Historic. More track action coming up with sponsor laps in roughly about half an hour's time, and Formula 170s at about 2:15.
When you're in love with a beautiful woman, it's hard. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you know it's hard. Everybody wants her, everybody loves her, everybody wants to take your baby home. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you watch your friends. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, it never ends. You know that it's crazy, you wanna trust her, then somebody hangs up when you answer the phone. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you're going alone. Maybe it's just an ego problem. Problem is I've been fooled before by fair weather friends and faint-hearted lovers. And every time it happens, it just convinces me more. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you watch her eyes. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you look for life. Everybody tempts her, everybody tells her she's the most beautiful woman they know. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you're going alone. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, it's hard. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you know it's hard. You know that it's crazy, you wanna trust her, then somebody hangs up when you answer the phone. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you're going alone. Maybe it's just an ego problem. Problem is I've been fooled before by fair weather friends and faint-hearted lovers. And every time it happens, it just convinces me more. When you're in love with a beautiful woman, you watch her eyes. When you're in love with a beautiful woman,